Welcome back. This is episode 6 of the Situation Report, the quick and dirty guide to playing games with scrappers. I'm your host, Bob Faust. We've talked about a number of different subjects, all leading to one important moment, and that is the action phase. So now we're going to go into some detail as to how actions are declared and executed in order to fulfill the ultimate outcome of each turn, which is what are the models doing and how are they succeeding or not in doing what they set out to do. So as we discussed before, models will get action tokens assigned to them in the orders phase. We'll just use our little quick and dirty classroom here. And when that happens, a token and action token is placed next to each of them. During the actions phase, players will take turns declaring and executing actions for each of their different models that have action tokens. Not all models will have tokens because sometimes you'll have more miniatures on your force than your commander has command rating, and in that case you may end up with not having an action token on every model. That's okay. Part of the strategy of this game is resource management, and if you're a great tabletop general but you can't do resource management well, then that'll come back to bite you. So what it really does, though, is it makes you think twice before executing or before putting down those action tokens in the orders phase to make sure that you're going to be able to maximize your benefit or your strategic outcome. All right, so once we get to that point, we get to the actions phase. The player with the edge then gets to decide who's going to take the first action. So he doesn't have to do it himself. He can make his opponent do it. The reason he would do that is because having the edge, he's got the initiative and he can wait to counteract the first initial move of his opponent. And that might, in certain circumstances, be very useful. And then in other circumstances, he'll want to do the first action himself to capitalize on whatever had occurred last turn. So, one thing of note, when you have the edge, we've already discussed how you get an additional 3 action tokens added to your tactical pool in the orders phase. You also get to determine who begins placing orders on their models, and then in this phase, the action phase, not only do you get to determine who starts executing actions first, you or the opponent, but you also get an immunity to the break for the very first action your team takes in the turn. So, how does this play out? Well, let's go ahead and go back and say that the architect here, they have the edge this turn, and the Sons of Entropy have the break. So, in this particular setup, just for illustration purposes, we're going to have this architect go first. He'll execute the first action this turn. In doing that, he won't even ask for a break. He'll declare, I want to do standing fire on this enemy model, and the other player won't bother asking for a break because it's the first action done. Now, what if the architect player decided to let the Son of Entropy player go first? Well, that's fine. It doesn't forfeit that benefit from the edge. It's the first time an action is executed by a member of the edge player's crew. That model does not have a break checked for. That model is immune to that. So, even though we have this guy go first, and he does whatever action he's going to do, now the architect player is still being, the second player in the scenario right here, or in the turn, in this phase, is going to be the guy that then has the immunity to the break for that very first action he takes. Okay, well, let's go back. Let's pretend the architect's going to shoot first. What he has to do is declare what that model's going to be doing, who he's going to do it to, if it's a combat action, and then ask if there's a break. So it should go something like this. The architect player says, I'm going to have this apprentice do standing fire against that mutant. Is there a break? And assuming there's not, then the architect player removes the action token, brings out the number of dice equal to the rate of fire of his assault rifle, which in this case is 3. And then, let's say the defender's just out in the open, he's going to have 1d10. To execute the attack check, he rolls his 3d10. He takes the highest of the 3, which in this case is a 9. He adds that model's modified combat rating to this score, which in this case will be a 4. So his total attack result will be a 13. The defender will roll his single d10 since he's being targeted by a ranged attack out in the open. He's at half his combat rating, so he'll be at a 2, and that plus 5 is going to be a 7. So we have 13 to 7. And as you know with checks, since you've been through that segment, we have to meet or beat. And in this case, the total of 13 bypasses the total of 7 by 6 points. So the architect will have a plus 6 damage bonus for his weapon's base 4 damage check versus the mutant. Once this has been executed and whatever outcome has come to pass has been applied, the action ends and priority passes over to the other player. Now it's his opportunity to declare action and go from there, vice versa. And that's it. That's how it goes back and forth. Now, one of the best parts of doing this alternating model by model activation is that the circumstances on the field tactically shift fairly quickly. So it really does amp up that dynamic tension I often talk about, because it's not all of us in the movement phase, all of us in the shooting phase, all of us in the close combat phase. There's none of that crap. The conditions of the battle change from moment to moment. So, this guy, let's say the architect missed him altogether. Now he can either shoot him, full guns blazing, shoot him and move away, or he can move away to ambush, etc. At any point, each individual activation is going to result in an outcome that turns the tide one way or the other. And that's what makes for some great games. All right, so let's talk about the edge and the break, because those are two important components that really show up in the action phase. So the edge player, we've already discussed some opportunities there, what advantages they get, the bonus for the action tokens, the ability to choose who starts ordering actions first and who starts executing actions first, and then the immunity to his first action for a break. But now let's talk about the interrupt, because this is one of the other areas that really changes the texture and feel of the battle and creates some circumstances that are just downright amazing or horrifying, whichever side of the coin you're on. The break is asked for anytime someone declares an action. So when this guy was over here declaring his action against this guy, he said, I'm going to make a standing fire attack against that mutant. Is there a break? If the breaking player says yes, and he executes his break action, and we usually just have him flip it over because we got the edge on the other side and toss it back to the guy who's got the edge. What we do now is we halt the declaration and execution of that action. We don't forget what it was. We just stop it where it is. And now the opposed player here, the secondary player that controls this model, will make his break action declaration. So he's going to declare that he's going to do a standing fire on this model first. Okay, and then he asks, is there a break? And the reason he does that is because there are other game effects that allow a team to have a break that's not tied to the one that they get from losing the strategy check in a turn. So this break here is mechanical into the game turn. The other breaks can be additional ones, like say if you had extra rations for all your models. Usually that's a once per game usage. So we'll go ahead and just say he uses the break that was part of the strategy check. He's going to use that and he's going to shoot this model. So they resolve that attack, and if this guy's still standing and able to finish the first action he declared, which was standing fire against this model, then once this is done, if he's still legal to do that, he has to go ahead and execute that. So in this case, he would remove that token, roll his dice, see what happened. Now it's possible to interrupt an interrupt. So that's why we asked, like I said earlier, we asked for the break. But let's take a look at it this way. So this model has the break. This guy over here has one from extra rations for his crew. And then we're going to add another model into this mix here. I'm going to add an architect gun bot. And we're going to give him an action because he's going to use the once per game break there for extra rations. So this architect declares he's going to do a standing fire attack against this mutant. Is there a break? This player says yes, and then turns it over and hands that to the other guy. And then he says he's going to do standing fire. Is there a break? Well, now the architect player says yes, actually there is. Ta-da! He throws that away because it's once per game. This model is going to do standing fire against this mutant. Now, the question is, could he instead do that shooting? And the answer is no, because he's already declared what he's going to do. He can't come along after a break and execute a break himself. He's executing the base action. But this other model, who has done nothing so far, can do that extra break. Okay? Keep that clear. So, he started, he did a break interrupt, and he asked for a break, and he got one from this guy. So now we're going to work this backwards. We're going to resolve this from last break declaration to first, then back to the base action. It's really that simple. So he rolls his dice, uses his token. If this outcome, let's say he missed, this guy's still standing. Now we check to see, is his break action declaration still legal? Well, it is. So now he has to shoot that guy. He can't shoot this guy because he was already trained and focused on doing that. So we execute his break. Let's say he misses. And now we get back to this base action. We have to check, is it still legal? Perfect, it is. He does that, and now he gets to shoot the guy. So what happens if everybody hits instead of misses? Let's go back and look at that. So we put these tokens back. There we go. Okay. So we got the break over here. We got the once per game break over here. He declares, I'm going to do a standing fire action on that model. Is there a break? This guy says, yes, there is. I declare a standing fire action on that model. Is there a break? This guy says, yes, there is. Then declare a standing fire action on that guy. He uses this break. We execute this action. Ooh, that was tricky. Let's say he hits him and he shocks him. Well, he's instantly shocked and loses. I mean, when he's shocked, he instantly loses his action token. So now he is no longer able to execute this break action, and that goes away. So that's no longer legal. Then we go back to the core action. This guy's still standing. It's still legal. He's shocked. He fires on him. All he has to do is shock him a second time, and he's wounded and out of play. So that's a good example of how the interrupt system, while at first you might feel a little, overwhelmed or clunky with it, once you do it a few times, you realize it just goes bam, bam, bam by the numbers, and it can really, like I say, this whole scenario can change from action to action. Really amps up the tension and makes for some great gameplay. All right, so let's put this back here. Let's say he did not get shocked, but he was able to shoot this guy and shock him. Well, now this action has been executed. We go back to the first action, and that's no longer legal, so that can't be done. And that's the end of that original player's priority. Now it will go back to the other player to declare an action and go from there. But it will have to be with a different model because this guy doesn't have an action token. Anyhow, that's how the declaration and execution of actions works, particularly in combat. When we're talking about standard actions like movement, hustle, ambush, climbing, jumping, and steadying, none of those have any kind of combat element to them, so there's really, you can still be interrupted with a break, but the legality question is no longer a big issue. So in this case, let's say I decided I wanted to do a move action, and I wanted to get behind some cover. But this guy declared the break, and he wanted to shoot me before I did that. Well, let's say he shocks me. Now I can't execute that action, so it comes back to my turn, and I'm making a correction here. It's back to my turn. I can't execute this. I got to pick another model on my side to execute an action with. I misspoke earlier. It doesn't automatically pop back to the next guy. I've got to go to another model on my team that's got an action. I can execute that. Then priority would shift back over. Once you play it a few times, you'll get it. When we do some better videos and also do some battle reports where we show you an actual live game turn, a lot of this stuff will be clarified even more. But like I warned you, I'm no good at this crap. So here we are. And that's it for the basic interaction of the edge and the break. Now let's move on to, since we've gone through the declaration of actions completely, let's just kind of do a quick overview of what the different standard actions are and what the different combat actions are. So if you go to your handy dandy Scrappers quick reference sheet, let's see, go to the back here. Woohoo! You see we've got your move. You can move any distance up to 6 inches. That's always measured from front of leading edge to front of leading edge. So you move him, back this up here, you can see better. Snap this a little wider. This is 6 inches. You move him like this to where the leading edge comes within that range, not from here to the back edge. And when I say leading edge, that's either the square or round edge point of the direction that you're going directly. So that's what we're talking about. So that's a 6-inch move. The next item is hustle. Now with movement, you can move into difficult ground. And that's another segment for the situation report. We'll get into terrain and its effects on play. But for now, just know that you can move into difficult ground with a standard move. But when you do a hustle move, which is your standard move plus 4 inches, you cannot move into difficult ground. You're running full sprint. That's what you're doing, and you will be in a hazardous position if you try to negotiate some difficult terrain. All right, then we get to ambush. Ambush is initially overlooked by a lot of players because they don't understand the importance of preventing your enemy from getting a line of sight on you. Unlike other games of this ilk, we use rather realistic distances for ranged weapons, in so much that on a 48 by 48 inch table, a pistol can be used to kill somebody at any point on that board. It'll be really hard to hit them because it's going to be a super small target, but it's still possible, because if you were to fire a regular handgun bullet on this kind of distance in real life, that bullet could travel that distance without a problem. So we represent that in this game, which means that you need to stay behind concealment and cover like you do in real life, because it's not the game where you waltz out with a sword and run across the table while everybody misses you or bounces off your armor so you can chop them up in close combat. That doesn't really fly in Scrappers. You'll get to see that when you try it the first time. At any rate, what you do want to keep in mind is play it realistically, where you're going to keep your guys to concealment and cover and use the ambush action. So when you ambush, what you're simply doing is saying that I'm going to move up to 6 inches, and as long as I'm within 1 inch of a piece of concealment or cover terrain, I can now hide, essentially, and go into ambush. And I like to use a green pinty stone to show that they're like hiding in the bushes or whatever. So now, even though you can physically see the static model standing above that terrain piece, in game terms, you cannot draw a line of sight to him because he's in ambush. He stays in ambush until 3 things happen. He either executes an action that's not an ambush or a forfeit action. A line of sight is drawn to him without any interposing terrain or concealment in between him. So a guy moves out here, let's say he moves up to here. Now he gets an unimpeded line of sight from here to here. He's now detected and he's out of ambush. Or if an enemy model moves within a number of inches equal to its base combat rating, it will have detected that model and is no longer in ambush. All right? That's simple. But a lot of times guys will say, I got my ass kicked, I got shot from across the table, blah, blah, blah. And the first 2 questions I ask are, A, what percentage of your board's covered in scenery? Because for the most enjoyable of games, you want it to be like that. Just hammered with a bunch of opportunity to hide and run and get concealment and cover. And then the second question I ask is, did you ambush? And a lot of the times I get responses back that no, we didn't. And then I say, well, try it next time. That might help you not get shot in the face. And they have a good time after that because they're using the full breadth of the rules. All right. The other, climb and jump, those are terrain actions. They're pretty straightforward. Those are the actions that you execute in order to climb a height greater than 2 inches and a jump across a gap greater than 1 inch. Now, seeing how every table and every game board is different, we've got these rules are used to help abstract that type of movement. And it's essentially a pass-fail combat check, and all the particulars are in the particular rulebook, in their section of the rulebook. And then the final one's a steady action. So let's say my architect here is running, away because he's broken. And we'll just pretend this yellow bead is a broken token because he's yellow belly. He's running along. He's going to go off the table. We're doing random checks in the sit-rep phase of every turn until he recovers. And the only way he can get, or not recovers, but until he steadies. And the only way for him to steady is to execute an action. Let's say this is the action token we put on. Execute an action to do a steady action. And when he steadies, he can now, he's no longer broken, so that condition is taken away. And then he can move up to 3 inches to the nearest piece of terrain that provides concealment and or cover. And that's how you keep your dudes from running away. All right, and that's it for standard actions. Now, combat actions, that's going to be another, we're going to do that in a separate chapter here, in a separate episode, because this is going to be a lot more lengthy, and I want you guys to have, easy episode sizable bites. So I'm going to put it on hold for now, and we'll come back in episode, well, hell, whatever, 7 or 8, whatever one it is, and we'll get to kicking on the actual combat actions and all of the parts and pieces that surround that, because they're far more detailed than your standard actions. Again, sorry for the rough and tumble way this is being done, but at least hopefully it'll help you see and visualize and get a little further explanation than the rules text will give you. And I'm Bob Faust signing out. Thanks.